In the crisp autumn of 1066, the fate of England hung precariously in the balance. A single, brutal clash on Senlac Hill would not only decide who wore the crown, but would irrevocably reshape a nation's language, culture, and very identity. This was the Battle of Hastings. The stage was set by the death of Edward the Confessor, King of England, in January 1066. Childless and without a clear heir, his passing plunged the kingdom into a succession crisis. The Witenagemot, the English Council of Wise Men, quickly elected Harold Godwin's son, a powerful earl, as the new king. But Harold's claim was immediately challenged. From across the English Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, asserted his own right to the throne. William claimed Edward had promised him the crown years earlier, a promise allegedly supported by Harold himself during a visit to Normandy. Adding to the chaos, Harald Hardrada, the formidable king of Norway, also laid claim to the English throne. Hardrada, a veteran warrior and claimant through a previous treaty, launched an invasion of northern England with a large Viking fleet in September 1066. King Harold Godwin's son, anticipating William's invasion from the south, had assembled his Anglo-Saxon army, the FYRD, along the southern coast. Upon hearing of Hardrada's invasion in the north, Harold made a lightning-fast march of over 185 miles in just 4 days. On September 25, 1066, Harold's forces met Hardrada's Norwegians and their English allies at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, near York. It was a stunning victory for Harold, with both Hardrada and his ally Tostig Godwin's son, Harold's own estranged brother, killed in the fighting. However, this hard-won victory came at a terrible cost. Harold's army was exhausted and depleted. While he celebrated in York, a devastating blow struck his position. William of Normandy's invasion fleet had landed unopposed on the southern coast at Pevensey Bay on September 28, 1066. Harold was forced into another grueling march south, gathering what remaining troops he could. His army, now numbering around 7,000 men, was largely composed of infantry, including the elite housecarls, his personal guard, and the FYRD, a militia of peasant farmers. William's army, estimated at around 7,000 to 8,000 men, was a diverse force. It included Norman knights, Breton auxiliaries, and French mercenaries, renowned for their cavalry and archers, giving them a tactical advantage in varied terrain. On the morning of October 14, 1066, Harold's army took up a defensive position atop Senlac Hill, near the town of Hastings. They formed a tight shield wall, a formidable tactic that had served the Anglo-Saxons well against Viking invaders, relying on their strength and discipline. William, observing Harold's strong defensive position, knew a direct assault up the hill would be costly. He deployed his forces strategically, archers to soften the enemy line, followed by Norman infantry, and finally, the feared Norman cavalry to break through. The battle commenced around 9 a.m. with a barrage of Norman arrows. However, the Anglo-Saxon shield wall proved remarkably resilient, with shields overlapping and spears thrusting outward, repelling the initial waves of infantry and cavalry charges. For hours, the battle raged on Senlac Hill. The Norman attacks, including feigned retreats designed to lure the Anglo-Saxons out of their strong defensive formation, were met with fierce resistance. The Anglo-Saxons held their ground with incredible tenacity. A critical turning point occurred when rumors spread that Duke William had fallen. The Norman lines faltered, but William, lifting his helmet to show he was alive, rallied his troops with a rousing speech, demonstrating immense personal courage. As the day wore on, the effectiveness of the Norman archers, firing at closer range and at a higher trajectory, began to take its toll. The shield wall, though still strong, started to show signs of wear and tear, with casualties mounting. The decisive moment came late in the afternoon. A concentrated Norman assault, perhaps exploiting a breach or a weakening in the shield wall, allowed Norman knights to penetrate the Anglo-Saxon lines. The disciplined formation began to break. The legend of King Harold's death is famously depicted in the Bayeux Tapestry, showing an arrow striking him in the eye, though historical accounts vary. Regardless of the precise cause, Harold fell, and with their king dead, the Anglo-Saxon resistance crumbled. By dusk, the Battle of Hastings was over. The Anglo-Saxon army was routed, and William the Conqueror, as he would become known, had won a decisive victory. The cost was immense, with thousands of lives lost on both sides. William's victory at Hastings was not the end, but the beginning of the Norman conquest. He marched on London, and after consolidating his power, was crowned King of England on Christmas Day, 1066, in Westminster Abbey. The Norman conquest ushered in profound changes. A new ruling class replaced the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy, and the English language began a significant transformation, absorbing thousands of French and Latin words, evolving into Middle English. Norman architecture, characterized by imposing stone castles and cathedrals, began to dominate the landscape, a visible symbol of the new order. The Domesday Book, a comprehensive survey commissioned by William in 1086, meticulously recorded land ownership and resources. The feudal system was reinforced and formalized under Norman rule, fundamentally altering land tenure and social structure. The relationship between king, lords, and peasants became more rigid and hierarchical. The military tactics also evolved. The dominance of cavalry, the use of castles for strategic control, and the integration of archers became more pronounced in English warfare, influencing battles for centuries to come. Interestingly, the Bayeux Tapestry, a remarkable embroidered cloth nearly 70 meters long, created around the 1070s, provides a unique, albeit biased, visual narrative of the events leading up to and including the Battle of Hastings from a Norman perspective. The Battle of Hastings was more than just a military engagement, it was a cultural watershed. It connected England more closely to continental Europe, particularly France, and laid the foundations for the modern English state. The legacy of 1066 is undeniable. It's a story of ambition, conquest, and the profound, often unexpected, ways in which history can be reshaped by the outcome of a single day's conflict. The echoes of Hastings can still be felt today, from the legal system and the language we speak to the very concept of British identity. It remains one of history's most consequential battles. What other pivotal moments in history dramatically altered the course of nations? Join us next time as we delve into another epic-defining clash that reshaped the world.